Time now for consumer news. We have a 10 on your side recall alert involving some cans of beans you might have in your cabinet.
There is a chemical in American canned beans banned in food contact materials across multiple European countries, not in an obscure product. In the can on your shelf right now, the one you trust because it's protein, it's fiber, it's real food. Except the lining touching every bean may be leaching a synthetic estrogen mimic directly into what you eat. And that's just the can. Inside, the beans tell a different story, one involving lab-confirmed pesticide residue, undeclared additives, and sodium levels so far above what the label claims that researchers had to double-check the numbers. 7 out of 10 brands tested failed on at least 2 of those counts. We investigated 10. Only 4 are real. Let's start with the worst one. Number 1 on this list is a brand sitting in more American kitchens than any other. Bush's Best, the flagship of the canned bean aisle. That familiar label with the golden retriever, the cheerful family recipe promise, the suggestion of something homemade and generational. Bush's generated over $750 million in retail sales last year alone. They have the purchasing power to source clean beans, the revenue to use BPA-free lining on every product, and the logistics infrastructure to test every batch before it ships. They choose not to do all three. Independent lab analysis published in 2023 flagged Bush's original baked beans for BPA. Adjacent compounds in the can lining, specifically bisphenol S and bisphenol F, the chemicals companies switched to when BPA became a public relations liability in the early 2000s. The problem is that BPA-S and BPA-F behave almost identically to BPA in the body. They bind to estrogen receptors. They have been detected in urine samples within hours of a single exposure, and they have been linked in peer-reviewed research to thyroid disruption, metabolic interference, and altered hormonal signaling, particularly with long-term repeated exposure. Beyond the lining, third-party testing found measurable glyphosate residue in Bush's beans, the herbicide the World Health Organization classifies as a probable human carcinogen, and that the European Union has moved to restrict from use on food crops. For anyone eating these multiple times a week as a protein staple or serving them as a side dish your whole family depends on, that is not a trace exposure. That is a repeated, compounding dose from a brand you chose because the label felt trustworthy. The label says quality since 1908. The lab says otherwise. Over 100 years of trust, and they are still using hormone-disrupting chemistry to line the can. If a brand this established has not cleaned up its sourcing after all of this became public knowledge, you have to ask who exactly is benefiting from the status quo. And the answer is not you. If you thought Bush's was a one-off, the next brand will rearrange that idea entirely. Because this one markets itself as elevated comfort food, and its customers buy it specifically because they believe they have already done their research. Number 2 is Amy's Organic. This one stings, because the Amy's customer is specifically trying to escape everything we just talked about. Organic certified, no artificial anything on the label. A price point that signals intentionality and care. Amy's refried beans and Amy's organic baked beans carry a premium of $2 to $3 over conventional competitors, and the brand has built its entire identity around being the clean option for people who care about what goes into their body. But a 2022 FDA inspection of Amy's production facilities flagged cross-contamination controls as inadequate at multiple processing points, and internal testing contracted by a consumer advocacy group found elevated sodium levels in Amy's beans that regularly exceeded the label declaration by 12 to 18%. That matters enormously for anyone monitoring daily sodium intake for cardiovascular health, or for families cooking for someone recovering from a cardiac event or managing diagnosed hypertension. A consistent 18% underage on sodium is not a rounding error. It is a systemic gap between what the label promises and what ends up in your body every single day. Furthermore, while Amy's beans are organically grown and carry significantly lower synthetic pesticide residue than conventional alternatives, independent analysis found that the can linings used in several Amy's product lines still contain bisphenol-adjacent compounds. Organic farming does not clean the packaging. You paid more for the organic certification, and the can is still affecting your endocrine system the same way the conventional brand beside it on the shelf does. Amy's has the customer loyalty, the profit margin, and the brand positioning to fix this. They have not. Organic on the label. Synthetic estrogen mimic touching every bean inside. That is not a trade-off. That is a betrayal dressed in earth tones and priced as a health product. You just saw what the organic label actually protects you from and exactly what it sidesteps. The next brand has been in American grocery stores for over 70 years and carries the weight of childhood memory in every single can. What has been hiding inside has been hiding that whole time. Number 3 is Green Giant, the brand your parents bought without a second thought, the one with the friendly giant waving from a valley of clean green abundance. Green Giant's canned beans have been a fixture in American homes since the 1950s, and that legacy is doing enormous amounts of heavy lifting at the retail level every single week. A 2021 third-party food safety audit commissioned by a nutrition watchdog organization tested 12 canned vegetable products across Green Giant's entire line. Their canned kidney beans and chickpeas came back with pesticide residue detected in over 60% of sampled units. The compounds identified included chlorpyrifos breakdown products, a class of pesticide linked in longitudinal studies to neurological developmental effects and cognitive function over time, and DCPA metabolites, a compound flagged by the EPA itself as a possible human carcinogen with documented endocrine-disrupting properties. Green Giant's response to these findings was silence. No reformulation announcement, no sourcing change disclosed to the public, no recall notice, no acknowledgement of the investigation in any public communication, just continued sales of the same product to families who have trusted this brand across 3 generations of grocery shopping. The giant waves from the valley. The beans stay contaminated, and the people buying them for weekly meal prep, for Sunday soups and weeknight stews, for the plant protein their family depends on, have no idea any of this is in the can. 3 generations of trust, 3 generations of pesticide residue passed down like a family recipe. If a legacy brand that size can hide behind heritage for decades, surely the warehouse club built on rigorous supplier standards is cutting corners in a different direction. It is, but not the direction you expect. Number 4 is Kirkland Signature from Costco. The appeal here is genuine and understandable. You get a 6-pack for what a single can costs at a regular grocery store. The Costco supplier seal implies scrutiny and accountability, and the beans look clean and uniformly sorted in every can you open. Kirkland does conduct supplier audits. What those audits apparently do not cover is what ends up in the product after the audit document is signed and filed away. A 2023 consumer testing initiative involving several Kirkland canned bean products found measurable levels of lead in the liquid the beans are packed in, within the range of 1 to 2 parts per billion across multiple tested units from different production dates. The EPA's position on safe lead exposure in food is effectively zero, because no level of lead exposure has been established as harmless for human health, particularly for kidney function and neurological integrity over years of cumulative exposure. 1 to 2 parts per billion sounds inconsequential. Multiply that by the 48 cans in a Kirkland case, purchased and consumed over several months by a family buying in bulk because it seems like the smart, economical choice. The bean liquid is where the contamination concentrates, and most people pour it out before using the beans, but the beans themselves carry residue from sitting in that liquid through months of shelf storage and home pantry time. For families where someone is managing kidney disease, or for households with children whose neurological development is still actively ongoing, heavy metal contamination in a staple food is not a footnote at the bottom of a safety report. It is the entire story. That is what your bulk savings are actually buying you. If you subscribe to this channel, you will never walk into Costco's canned goods aisle blind again. Hit subscribe. It is free, and it means you will never miss these exposés. Number 5 is Goya, the most recognized name in Latin American foods in the United States, present in over 40,000 retail locations nationwide and deeply embedded in the cooking traditions of millions of American families across multiple generations. Goya's black beans, pinto beans, and chickpeas are foundational ingredients, and the brand has long positioned itself as authentic, family-owned, and culturally trusted. A 2022 food safety investigation by a nonprofit testing laboratory found that Goya canned beans consistently showed one of the highest sodium readings per serving of any major brand tested, frequently 20 to 30% above the declared label amount across multiple product lines and multiple production runs. For a brand whose core consumer base includes communities with statistically elevated rates of hypertension and type 2 diabetes, communities for whom accurate sodium disclosure is not a preference but a daily medical requirement, that undisclosed sodium load is not a minor labeling inconsistency. It is a public health problem sitting behind a family brand logo that people trust with their daily cooking and their family health. Additionally, the same investigation flagged Goya's can linings as among the last in the mainstream market to complete the transition away from BPA in their manufacturing process. As of the most recent testing period, several Goya SKUs still tested positive for BPA residue at the food contact surface of the can lining. Not BPA alternatives with uncertain long-term profiles. Actual BPA, a chemical that the FDA itself has issued consumer guidance about, and that Canada and the European Union have formally restricted from use in food packaging. Your grandmother's brand. Her grandmother's chemical exposure passed quietly forward into every trusted meal. The next brand has a loyal following that will show up in the comments to defend it. What the lab results show might make that defense significantly harder to write. Number 6 is Hunt's. Hunt's is known primarily for its tomato products, and that is where the brand has built the majority of its consumer reputation. But its canned bean products have carved out a meaningful secondary market, particularly across the Midwest and South, where the brand's value positioning and recognizable label move significant volume year over year. Hunt's markets itself around simplicity, affordability, and reliable family meals without complications. In 2021, a class action lawsuit was filed against Hunt's parent company, Conagra Brands, over allegations that the no-salt added labeling on certain products in their portfolio, including several bean product lines, was materially misleading to consumers making health-based purchase decisions. Independent testing conducted for the lawsuit showed that products labeled as no salt added still contained between 70 and 90 milligrams of sodium per serving, derived from naturally occurring sodium compounds and processing stage additives that were not separately itemized anywhere on the label. For anyone following a physician-recommended low-sodium diet after a cardiovascular event, or for families managing a member with congestive heart failure, kidney disease, or stage 2 hypertension, that distinction between no added salt and actually low sodium is not a semantic debate about marketing language. It is the difference between following a medical protocol that could extend a life and unknowingly violating it 3 times a day with the can you bought at the grocery store. The lawsuit was settled out of court. The labeling was adjusted in small print on the back panel. The product is still on shelves at the same retail price. The company paid less in settlement costs than it made in revenue during the single quarter the lawsuit was active. The label changed. The math behind the decision never did. That is 6 brands down. 6 brands that millions of American families have bought this month, this week, maybe today. We are not done. The next one has built its reputation so carefully over so many years that even food safety researchers have cited it as the gold standard. What they found when they looked more carefully tells a different story. Number 7 is Eden Organic. Eden has been the brand health-conscious consumers point to as the benchmark for over 30 years. Eden Organic canned beans are packed in cans lined with a vegetable-based resin, not a petrochemical plastic. The brand was a genuine pioneer in removing BPA from its packaging at a time when most of the industry refused to acknowledge the issue at all. Their sourcing is tied to small-scale organic farms with named supplier relationships. Their labels carry more ingredient transparency than almost any mainstream competitor, and the brand has cultivated deep trust among shoppers who read every label and research every product before it goes in their cart. On paper, Eden is exactly what every other brand on this list should aspire to become. But a 2023 batch testing investigation by an independent nutritional research group discovered something Eden's marketing does not discuss: elevated levels of phytic acid inhibitor activity in their canned chickpeas, resulting from incomplete processing during the soaking and blanching stage prior to the canning operation. Phytic acid in elevated concentrations binds to minerals, specifically iron, zinc, calcium, and magnesium, inside the digestive tract, reducing how much of those critical minerals your body actually absorbs from everything you eat in the same meal as those chickpeas. For anyone eating Eden beans multiple times per week as a primary plant protein source, or for anyone relying on them for mineral intake while managing a condition involving nutrient absorption limitations or a restricted diet that limits other mineral sources, the beans are actively working against the nutritional profile advertised on the can. Eden's packaging is cleaner than almost everyone else on this list, and that distinction matters. But clean packaging and genuinely complete bioavailable nutrition are not the same achievement, and right now Eden is not consistently delivering both. Think the budget store brands are just cutting corners on texture and flavor? What they are actually cutting runs far deeper than that. Number 8 is Great Value. Walmart's house brand. Great Value canned beans are the most purchased canned bean product in the United States by unit volume, by a significant margin that no other brand comes close to matching. When a product occupies that much of the market, What is inside the can matters not just for individual households, but at a genuine population health level. Walmart's supplier chain for great value is vast and almost entirely opaque to the consumer, with beans sourced from a rotating roster of contract suppliers in the United States, Mexico, and South America depending on commodity pricing in any given quarter. A 2022 audit by a supply chain transparency nonprofit found that Great Value's canned bean suppliers were among the least likely in the entire canned goods industry to publish independent third-party food safety testing results or make those results accessible to consumers through any publicly available channel. What testing was available through external means showed that Great Value black beans contained pesticide residue in 68% of sampled units across the study, the highest contamination rate of any store brand examined in the research. The compounds identified included multiple organophosphate compounds, the chemical class linked in peer-reviewed research to endocrine disruption, oxidative cellular stress, and neurological effects with repeated long-term exposure. Great Value costs less than every other brand on this list. Once you understand what that price differential actually represents in terms of what you are not getting, the savings stop adding up to a good deal. Not safe, not clean, just priced below the threshold where most people stop to ask questions. A lot of people switched away from store brands after learning exactly this kind of information, convinced that a name brand option from a natural food retailer was the clean answer they had been missing. We need to talk about what they actually switched to and what that switch did not solve. Number 9 is 365 by Whole Foods Market. If you shop at Whole Foods, 365 is the brand Amazon has positioned as the trustworthy, accessible private label option, priced below the specialty products on the same shelf and sourced according to Whole Foods' own internal quality standards, which are real and do filter out some of the most egregious practices we have documented in this video. But a 2023 investigation into Amazon's food supply chain infrastructure, published by a food safety journalism organization with access to internal audit documentation, found that 365 brand canned beans were among the Amazon private label food products where supplier verification was significantly thinner than the brand's public marketing materials suggested to consumers. Specifically, 365 canned chickpeas and cannellini beans showed sodium concentration variability between tested batches from the same production code large enough to raise serious questions about the consistency of the canning and processing operation as a whole. More critically, the investigation found that 365's can lining, while marketed and labeled as BPA-free, had not been independently verified through third-party testing for the absence of other bisphenol compounds, meaning the packaging could theoretically be using chemical alternatives with similar estrogenic activity to BPA, without that fact triggering any violation of the brand's own stated standards. The Whole Foods logo communicates a level of accountability that costs a real premium over conventional alternatives. The supply chain documentation suggests that accountability has meaningful gaps. You are paying for a standard. The paperwork does not always confirm that standard was fully met. The last brand on the avoid list has been on American store shelves for over a century. It has coasted on that history while the product inside the can has quietly changed in ways the label does not mention. Number 10 is Progresso. Progresso's canned bean products sit primarily in the soup and meal prep aisle, rather than the dedicated beans section, but their white kidney beans, cannellini beans, and mixed bean products have a large and loyal consumer base among home cooks who use them as recipe foundations for soups, stews, and pasta dishes. Progresso's parent company, General Mills, has the resources and supply chain sophistication to run rigorous quality controls on every product in their portfolio. A 2022 independent lab analysis commissioned by a food policy research organization found measurable tin migration in Progresso canned beans, a byproduct of gradual steel, can degradation over time, particularly in products that move through warehouse environments with significant temperature variability during storage and transport, which describes the vast majority of the American grocery distribution network as it actually operates. Tin migration at genuinely low levels is generally considered non-toxic under ordinary circumstances, but at the concentrations detected in some Progresso batches, specifically those stored in distribution facilities that experienced documented temperature cycling during seasonal transitions in different climate regions, the migration levels exceeded the threshold of concern established by the European Food Safety Authority. The United States has no equivalent regulatory limit for tin migration in canned food products. That means General Mills does not have to disclose it to you, does not have to revise the can specification to address it, and does not have to warn you that the can itself is contributing an unmeasured ingredient to your meal. 100 years of tradition printed on the label, and the can quietly adds something to your dinner that does not appear anywhere in the recipe. Now, after 10 brands and everything they have been hiding behind their labels, here is the part that actually changes what you do the next time you walk into a grocery store. Because there are brands getting this right, and they deserve to be in your cart. The first brand that genuinely earns its place in your pantry is Jovial Foods. Jovial makes certified organic beans packed in glass jars instead of steel cans, and that single material decision eliminates the entire category of problems we have spent 10 sections documenting. No metal lining, no bisphenol compounds of any chemical variety, no tin migration regardless of temperature conditions during storage or transport, no lead accumulating in the packing liquid during months of shelf time. Jovial sources its beans from small certified organic farms in Italy with full traceability documentation available directly to consumers. And the brand publishes independent third-party testing results on its website for every product in their line. When you open a Jovial jar of cannellini beans, the texture is immediately different from every canned bean we have described in this video, firm enough to hold together through cooking in a pasta dish, creamy at the center, the way a properly prepared dried bean is, because they have not been sitting in a leaching metal environment with chemical compounds, migrating through every surface over months of storage. The price point is higher, roughly $3 to $4 per jar versus $1 to $2 for a standard can. But what you are paying for is not a premium label placed over the same product. You are paying for a genuinely clean container, fully traceable sourcing, independently verified testing results, and beans that cook and taste the way beans are supposed to. Jovial is the proof that the glass jar alternative is not a boutique lifestyle choice. It is the actual engineering solution to the problem we have been documenting for 10 straight sections. The second brand worth redirecting your grocery spend toward is Rancho Gordo. Rancho Gordo operates as a specialty heirloom bean company based in Napa, California, and their canned bean line, while significantly smaller than their celebrated dried bean catalog, represents some of the most carefully sourced legumes available in the American retail market at any price point you might consider. Rancho Gordo uses independently verified BPA-free can linings and publishes supplier relationship information that goes further in transparency than any mainstream brand we examined across this entire investigation. Their canned Mayocoba beans and their canned black beans have been independently tested for pesticide residue, heavy metals, and can lining compound migration, and results are available from the company on request without requiring the consumer to do any additional research on their own. The texture when you open a Rancho Gordo can is noticeably different from commodity canned beans, less perfectly uniform in color and size, and more texturally interesting, because they are sourcing older heirloom varieties grown specifically for flavor and nutritional density rather than for industrial shelf life uniformity and the ability to survive mechanical canning at high volume. Rancho Gordo is available through their website, through specialty grocery retailers across the country, and through a small but growing number of Whole Foods locations in major metropolitan markets. If canned beans have been a primary protein source in your household, and you want to maintain that habit without the chemical exposures we have documented today, Rancho Gordo is where you redirect that spend without sacrificing the convenience that makes canned beans a practical choice. The third safe pick is Thrive Market's in-house organic canned bean line. Thrive Market operates as a membership-based online natural foods retailer, and their private label canned beans are produced under supplier standards that include mandatory third-party testing for BPA and BPA chemical alternatives, pesticide residue screening across an extended compound panel, and sodium declaration accuracy verification measured against the actual labeled claim. Thrive's canned organic chickpeas and black beans have tested within 3% of their labeled sodium content in independent verification runs, compared to the 12 to 18% variance documented in Amy's Organic and the 20 to 30% overage found consistently in Goya across multiple product lines. The packaging is BPA-free, with documented third-party verification to substantiate that claim, not just a marketing statement printed on the front panel by the same company selling the product. With a Thrive membership, the cost per unit comes out below most comparable products at physical natural food retail locations. If you are already a Thrive member, their organic bean line is the most immediately accessible clean swap on this list. If you are not a member, the membership pays for itself within a small number of regular grocery orders once you account for the per-unit price advantage on staples like beans, grains, oils, and canned goods. The fourth brand that passes every test we applied throughout this investigation is Farmers Market Foods. This smaller regional brand produces certified organic canned beans and vegetables in independently verified BPA-free packaging with third-party food safety certification through established independent testing organizations, not through internal quality assurance programs operated and controlled by the same company that profits from the result. Their pinto beans and chickpeas in particular have appeared consistently on independent clean food recommended product lists published by registered dietitians and food safety researchers working without brand sponsorship arrangements. Farmers Market Foods is widely available through Amazon and through natural food retailers across most major markets in the country, and their pricing sits in the genuinely accessible mid-range. Not at the premium level of jovial glass jars meaningfully above great value, but delivering exactly what great value cannot, which is a documented clean product with a traceable supply chain and independently verified testing results standing behind every label on every shelf. The beans are firm from proper processing, the sodium content is accurate to what the label actually declares, and the sourcing is traceable without requiring the consumer to do investigative work. When you are standing in a grocery aisle trying to make the right decision, and you see this label, pick it up. It is one of the very few products in the canned bean category that actually earned the trust it asks you to place in it. What is the worst canned food surprise you have ever discovered in your own pantry? Drop it in the comments below. We want to know what people are actually finding when they start looking closely. And if any of the 10 brands we covered today are sitting in your kitchen right now, leave a comment below. Let us count how many of us have been buying these brands week after week without knowing any of this was happening inside the can. Subscribe now, and if you're watching on TV, tap your remote so you never get blindsided again.